Welcome to the EarthWorks Podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joel Simmons, and this is another EarthWorks Podcast. It is Thanksgiving week in the year 2023. We're all very thankful that we made it through another season without a whole lot of death and destruction. And actually, guys, it was fairly easy year across most places, I think. Anyway, I mean, I was down in Jack, and you and I were down in the Mid-Atlantic last week, and most of the guys reported they had a fairly easy growing season in that part of the country, which is usually the worst place in the country to grow grass. So it's been an interesting year all around. But I wanted to have a chance to bring the podcast team of Kevin Hicks and Jack Higgins and myself together for a quick little kind of review and say thanks to everybody for all the support that we've had. We've had a incredibly good year, and it's been a lot of fun, and we've learned a lot of stuff. Jack, since we were down there last week and we played some pretty bad golf at the Buttery Nipple at the Greater Washington event, what was your take on some of the guys' feedback from the season?
Yeah, definitely. Well, so it was a strange year, kind of. It was easy in some parts. Right now, everyone was very dry. They were all very dry in this like October, November, and that's in Virginia, Maryland. Whereas here in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, we've been very wet this fall. So like, two areas very seemingly close together. With kind of different weather in the last 8 weeks, and these guys are on what was that, like November 7th, November 8th, talking about I had to water last night. I had to,
exactly
turn the heads on last night. It's like, whoa, yeah, interesting. But anyway, that was kind of that was a fun event, by the way. That was a great.
It's always a fun event.
Anniversary, right?
Yeah.
They were saying 30 years of that end of the season party, the Buttery Nipple.
What time out for those of me in the West? What's the genesis of that name for a tournament?
Go ahead, Jack. Fill that in.
Or do I not want to know?
No,
it's all right. It's fairly safe.
It's fine. It's a cocktail. It's a drink, and it's a gross drink. I think it's
a sweet drink.
What is it? It's butterscotch schnapps.
Okay.
And I was there at the bar at the end of the night. I don't know if this surprises you. They were going over they were going over inventory and saying, I think we overdid it on the butterscotch. I think we got the ratio wrong because there's a lot of butterscotch.
Butter? I didn't know there was such a thing.
It's
so
butterscotch.
What else?
It's the schnapps and Bailey's. So it's Bailey's and butterscotch schnapps. I can't even say that. But it's and there was buckets of it going around in all the carts and guys drinking it down.
That sounds horrible.
It's pretty horrible, actually.
30 years of this.
Tasty though. I mean, the first one goes down well. The rest of them are like nauseating.
It's like an alcoholic candy bar or something.
That's kind of what it was. But it helps your golf game. It really helps the swing come through fairly nicely, which is kind of fun.
Well, this group had a great time kind of celebrating like a successful event and a successful group of guys. And there was probably like 140 golfers, they said.
Which was big for them.
Yeah, it's big. They had people come in from all over the country. Some of the originals, right?
Mr. Smickley was there. Glenn Smickley, the former superintendent who built Robert Trent Jones and was instrumental in that area. First one to bring bent grass into the region.
Was that the event that Tim Haynes came in for too?
Tim Haynes came in from California. Okay. Bob Wren was there from Florida. Glenn Smickley, and they spoke at the evening, which was really nice. They all got up and said a few things. Glenn had just some very eloquent things to say to the group. I mean, he was there when it started, so it was really a very, very cool event, and it was great to see all those guys come back. And that Tim and Bob Wren and Glenn, of course, were all part of that original Robert Trent Jones experience when they built the course in the early 90s. So it was kind of neat to see the whole thing, and it was fun to play, and got to play with some new guys, which was always good. And just see a lot of people that we hadn't seen for a while.
They started that chapter together as well. the GCSA back then, back around that time, the early 90s. And it was just an accessibility thing. It was too far to get to the other other chapter meetings. So,
and
It's
there
so
was a
funny.
little controversy at the time. I mean, it was actually, they got a little pushback from some of the other chapters thinking that they were trying to, sneak into their territory. And it wasn't that at all. It was just, it started out to be just a group of guys that got together, played some golf, had a couple beers, and talked shop and talked about what's going on. And, it's funny because, we all do this. We go around to a lot of these association meetings, and, certainly having been doing this now for 36 years, I spent a lot of time early on at association meetings, but nowadays they're not super strong, not well attended. But this one, 141 golfers, it was spectacular. I mean, it was just a great day of guys getting together and talking shop. And it really brings back, the days of when people really realized how important, and Kevin, I'm sure you can attest to this, how important these association meetings can be. And if they're well done, and, it's a chance to get together as superintendents. Now it's mostly a bunch of, vendors that are playing golf. But, what we were able to accomplish years ago at these meetings was really very important, I think, and I'm sure you would agree.
Yeah, much more of a fraternal sort of a gathering, I think, in the past. But I'm seeing a lot of smaller groups. It's a little bit different. It's funny when I listen to you guys talk about association events, and you're probably monthly meetings and things like that. And, proximity is such a relative thing, because the Montana, the Peaks and Prairies chapter, there's guys that drive 10 hours one way to get to the meeting.
Yeah, that's got to be nuts.
Which gets you to what, Florida, maybe, or close to it?
Wow. Not, but I mean, it gets you to North Carolina.
Yeah. So it's different, but a lot of those chapters also only meet a couple times a year because it's so tough to get to. So, but I see a lot of smaller groups, kind of regional guys getting together and, hitting the simulator or doing something like that, just to do that, to talk shop, which is great.
These guys find it important, and like they talked a lot about this in these speeches at the end of the night, that that the consistency was important, that the interval is not too long between meetings, because everyone needs the help. They need each other, and it's important to get together. They, need the camaraderie, need the help, need the ideas.
And even in a group like that, I mean, I've said this on our podcast a number of times, but that fraternity that Glenn Smickley is the patriarch of, the Robert Trent Jones group, as I call them. I mean, they're very close, and there's guys all over the country now that have come from that original group, and they talk a lot. I mean, they're, a lot of them are very close in the Washington area. They talk on a regular basis. But even having said that, getting together and playing around a golf or having a couple beers face to face, it really made a big difference to these guys. And they really were grateful that they had the opportunity to all get together on a meeting like this. So it was just a great event. And I can contest, and I think, Jack, you can probably say the same thing. I didn't have a single buttery nipple, not one. Didn't touch the stuff.
No, I wouldn't think of it.
Yeah. Well, I think the same thing for the personal contact could be said for our side of the business too. That really showed through, I think, in the last couple of years with COVID, that, that contact, that personal face-to-face meeting was missed, and it's good to get plugged back into that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Are they getting any better?
Yeah. Out my way, they definitely are.
More people are coming.
Yep. Yeah. And just being able to see clients in person on a regular basis too, I think has been good for me. I think it's really important, and there's no better opportunity than to ride around in a golf cart with a superintendent and talk shop, or, be on a sports field and see what's going on. So I think that's good. We're back to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's really one of the greatest things of this industry is the camaraderie, the brotherhood.
Yep.
The willingness to ask questions and share ideas, and just the friendships that we've all developed over the years. I mean, you really can't ask for a better place to be as an industry than where we are. We're very fortunate, and it really is about the people, and those kind of meetings really, I mean, that meeting really brought it out for me. It was just a lot of fun to be there. And even though I think I lost 13 balls on the course, and that's in a scramble. So
we had a good time.
Yeah. Now that I'm pushing 70, I think I'm going to learn how to play golf after all these years of being on some of the best golf courses in the world.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, this is my 31st year in a row of playing more golf.
Oh, good.
Of the vow to play more golf, and I carded exactly 2 rounds this year.
Yeah.
But the 2 rounds were at Cypress Point and Monterey Peninsula Country Club. So
well, that's
only going to get 2. Those are 2 pretty.
Those are the 2. Yeah. Cypress Point is top 3, I think, in the world for me.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and again, think about that. We have a chance to see those kind of properties. I mean, you know, to see a place like that, and, you know, a place like the National out on Long Island. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. So, Kevin, you and I had talked earlier about a couple issues that came up. I mean, let's talk a little bit about our friend, and I don't think he'll mind us talking about him, but you know, Justin Mannon just did a new grow in at Pasatiempo. And of course, you know, Justin is very close to our family here. We talked to Justin quite a bit. He was a student of mine at Rutgers, and we've known him for years. But he has Pasatiempo may be one of the most beautiful golf courses that I've ever been on as well. But he had a grow-in, and he's been running affluent water, and it kind of kicked his tail a little bit at the very beginning. And you and I both were on suicide watch with him for a while. But you know, and you were there, 2 weeks ago now?
2 weeks ago, yeah.
And how was it?
You wouldn't know unless you knew the backstory. You wouldn't have known that he had any trouble at all. Those greens are absolutely flawless, and he's off suicide watch, and
he's off the roof.
Doing much better. But I mean, you know, he worked very closely with Jim Urbina on the renovation, and obviously it was Alistair McKenzie's home for a number of years. So no pressure there for Justin and his team to try to get it right. But there's a great story behind that golf course and what Justin's done to facilitate some pretty unique opportunities with respect to municipal effluent water in the area. They essentially built, and I'm going to get him on to talk about that specifically, but they essentially built an effluent plant on the site. Effluent water has its drawbacks.
Yeah.
And I recently had Lou Sharp on the podcast talking about different things with respect to construction. They happen to use pure distinction. And so Lou was out and he said, yeah, we got to get you some clean water. And as soon as he started flushing with potable water, things turned around in a hurry. And it wasn't pretty to begin with, but it was just that seedling stage. Jack, you look like you have a question. It was just the seedling stage that the bentgrass really struggled to get established. Once he got some cleaner water on those greens, man, they filled
flushed a little bit.
Yeah, really good. But it's
it's funny because Lou came in and said to him much what you and I had said, and I think we all knew, or certainly Justin knew. I mean, Justin is one of the best grass growers that I know. But you know, when you're in the heat of it and this stuff is happening, it really is painfully frustrating, and you could just see it. Like, I mean, we're kidding about the suicide watch, but maybe half kidding, but you know, it was very concerning for all of us. And you know, ultimately we looked at the water test and kind of knew that was the culprit, and you know, he's going to do the other 9 next year, and he's got a much better strategy for it. And Lou came out and just immediately said, yeah, this is water. And as soon as he went after that, you know, it cleaned up. I mean, it took a while, but you know, but that's a lesson for anybody that's growing grass, you know, establishing grass, to know that, you know, it doesn't take a lot of salts, a lot of sodium in particular, to affect the germination. And he got germination. He just, once it germinated, it just checked out after that. And it was very nerve-wracking, man. I can't even imagine. And I remember talking to him so many times. I can't even imagine the frustration that had to present to him. And he was on a deadline to get this thing up and running. It's going to open up next Friday. So, you know, and he's completely ready. I talked to him last Friday and he said, yeah, I'm completely ready. We're ready to roll, which is great.
He is.
I think that's something that like you read in the textbook, and you hear, because we all talk about like salt tolerant plants, and
Yeah.
even the guys that grow seashore paspalum, you like, oh no, it can tolerate all this salt, except when you're trying to grow it in
That's
The
right.
seedling stage.
That's right.
and
You know,
and it gets passed over. I think like that's like a sentence or two in a program, and then but
it's
like
it's similar to young kids. I mean, you're not going to feed a young kid a buttery nipple, but at the same time, once he's an adult, then you can start doing that.
Yeah.
They
I
just
tried to
can't. Their
feed Jack one,
systems,
but he wouldn't take it.
yeah, their systems aren't built to handle that. I see that a lot in Arizona, where during the ryegrass overseed, guys that are under a lot of salt pressure, the seedling pops just fine, and then it turns black and curls up and dies.
So what's
Wow.
the answer? So what do we suggest to people now? I mean,
Well,
obviously we got to watch and pay attention.
Because I and maybe that's a question better for him. You're going to have him on to talk about it. But like, who was the gentleman that you said came in and told them you got to look at the water, and then how do you quickly get clean water onto the site if you only have effluent?
Yeah, and it's a little bit tougher situation for him, because a lot of these places that have effluent sources will have, for instance, Troy Flanagan just did this at Olympic Club. He installed a potable loop around his greens. Justin doesn't have that option, so it's either or throughout the entire system. So it becomes a real cost concern for him.
Yeah, and that's the thing we got to talk about is that California, it's $1 million a year in water.
Yeah, so he was spending, I think, I don't quote me, he was spending many tens of thousands of dollars a night to run potable water, but he had to run like a 3 or 4 day flush in order to get the whole system charged and then uncharged, if you will. So that's the solution. I mean, his potable water isn't a lot better, but it's certainly better than the effluent water. In fact, his effluent water isn't that bad. It was just enough on the bicarbonates and just enough on the sodium combination.
And that's where I think we were all kind of caught with our pants down, was that we didn't expect it to be that bad. I mean, he has that system up, and so we didn't have that in our forefront when we were thinking about this.
Right.
When he first called me and said that I'm having this problem, the first thing we did was run water, and I think found the culprit, and Lou Sharp came in and completely confirmed it, having seen that across the country.
Yeah.
What was really disappointing though in this, and I'll mention no names, but he brought in some other folks that their answer was just hit it with 10 pounds of nitrogen, and it's just like that would have been disastrous. More salts, disastrous. I mean, he did get a little bit more aggressive with the nitrogen because he knew he had to kind of grow through this a little bit.
He needed to a certain degree. And that's something we talked a lot about, is that the way we set up a program at EarthWorks for grow-in, it's a very balanced approach, because so many grow-ins throughout the course of the last 30 years have been, just like you said, just pound it within, and then a year and a half, 2 years later, you're looking at 1.5 inches of pretty undigested thatch, and that's our goal, is to give superintendents a program that is sustainable for the long term. And so Justin's concern was, man, this isn't a lot of N, when we were kind of going through the grow-in program. And I said, you know what? It's easy to add. It's really hard to take it away.
And the detrimental downside of putting down 10 pounds, in a couple of weeks is, like you said, it's 1.5 inches of thatch that's going to be there for a long time.
That's not going to serve anybody.
And it's been so nice. I mean, I think this has been one of the most rewarding parts of my job here, is that we've got this wonderful grow-in program, and and it really does prevent the growth of thatch, and it gets you deeper roots and all that stuff. And when you see all the clients that we've been able to work with on this grow-in, and see their face, and see how it lights them up, and they know that they're going to have a great grow-in, and they're going to have a great, first 5 years because of all the work that they did. And it's not a huge investment. In fact, in some ways it can even be a lesser investment depending on how it's shifting, but it's been really rewarding, and we've all seen it.
I want to look closer in at the data of that water analysis from this summer, like to know how, when the plant is at that stage of just establishing, I want to see what the numbers are that it can't handle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we have a number of soil tests. We can actually,
Right.
you have that sitting there, Kev. We have that there.
I don't, but I could get it. It was between week 8 and week 9 that things really kind of turned backwards.
And he's probably dealing, I think I've seen his water tests, or, I've seen the 2-minute turf talks we've done and podcasts we've done with him. And he came and spoke at the Jersey conference a couple years ago. It was great. But yeah, I think his normal effluent water was somewhere like in the 800 parts per million of salt concentration. Like it's pretty salty.
Yeah. And a lot of bicarbs too.
A lot of bicarbs. I don't know that it was that salty, but the point being is that it doesn't take a lot. So certainly before going into growing and during growing, watching water is really the lesson learned here. And and I think like I said, and Lou said this very eloquently, I think on your podcast, Kevin, that it doesn't take a whole lot to affect that kind of a growing. Now he got through it. He flushed it out. He got through it. I think he threw a little bit more seed, and he did push a little bit more. And he used a lot of goodies in there to keep biology going, but and he got through it. And like I said, you'd walk through there the other day, and I was very, very happy to hear that it looked as good as it was, and that he's not on the roof anymore. So, which is all good. I had I did a couple of turf talks on this, but I wanted to share this in the little talk. I'll go through this. I was invited to join or to attend the academy, the Soils Academy up at Tom Irwin, our business partner up in New England, that Paul Scoffus had set up. And they talked about abiotic and biotic stresses. And it was really interesting the way it was presented, because we don't think about it that much. I mean, biotic stresses we think about a lot. We think about the pathogens. We might think about weeds or insects, all these things that are bio related. But it's these abiotic stresses that were really focused on this particular meeting. And Dr. Zellner and Dr. Mikowski from Rhode Island were there and talking, and it was fascinating. I mean, one of the things that they talked about, of course, this is New England. They talked about time under ice, which I did a turf talk on not too long ago. But that was kind of interesting for me. And Dr. Mikowski, I guess, had done some research, or there has been research done where they talked about bent grass can survive about 120 days under ice. Yep. But, and most guys in the country don't have this battle because they're not battling ice. But in those parts of the country where ice is a problem, in New England and in the upper Midwest, the question had always been, do we take it off? Do we fight with it? What do you do with ice? And and a lot of the superintendents that I talked to about it says, we used to take it off, but man, it was so damaging. You just could dig up the green so badly by taking it off, and then it's it's exposed, and God knows what happens the rest of winter. So the research was interesting. 120 days on bent grass, but for POA, it's as low as 45 days. Yeah. So it's a battle.
And that's the danger. I see it a lot in the mountains out this way, and it seems like Superintendent A decides, screw it, I'm going to go out and I'm going to clear these greens. And Superintendent B says, no, I'm going to be skiing the next week. I'll wait until the week after. And this year, there's one result. The next year, they do the same thing, and it's the complete reverse. So even though there's a lot of, and Paul Cook at Wisconsin's done a lot of research on this too. And there's no rhyme or reason to when things go south.
It might have been Paul's work that Dr. Mikowski was referring to. I'm not even sure who did that work, but I had never heard that before. I don't know, you might have, but I thought it was interesting to have something that definitive, that it can survive. But what do you do? I mean, do you take it off? Do you not take it off?
And a lot of it depends on the formation of the ice and the makeup of it. If it's clear, you're toast, because there's no oxygen in there. If it's cloudy, that means there's some O2 around, and there'll be some permeability in that ice layer.
And it also depends on if there's a snow layer between the grass and the ice.
Thickness doesn't matter necessarily as much as the composition of the ice.
That's interesting. And you're hopefully, like you're saying, snow on the surface of the turf is best.
A nice blanket.
Much preferred.
Yeah, for sure. for
Yeah,
sure.
and it
And
won't be
Paul was-
long before the snow is flying in this part of
Yeah.
the country now that we're sitting here at Thanksgiving week.
Yeah.
And you know,
We had
so
our first
it's a
little scare
conversation to be
yesterday.
had. But the other interesting thing about this that obviously feeds my ego and the work that we've done is that they all talked about the importance of dormant feeding and building that carbohydrate reserve in the plant. So by getting a nice dormant feed in, which is, we've all been preaching this for years, is maybe the most important application. In fact, Jack, I think you and I both got an email from a friend in Washington the other day about, do I put it down? Do I not put it down? And I've always said best application you can make is dormant. But think about it. It's the soils are still going to be warm for a couple months, even here in the Northeast. They're going to be warm for a couple months. You're going to build carbohydrate in that plant, and that carbohydrate reserve in that plant is going to be used to protect itself from these kind of abiotic stresses that are occurring through the winter months. So it really does. And it was interesting. It was nice to hear them talking about the importance of getting something in the, on the ground. And obviously a carbon-based material is going to be something that's going to actually help microbial activity. It's going to definitely mobilize nutrients. It's going to be there to help green you up in the spring. Whereas, a shot of synthetic might give you a little push now, but it's going to, it's not going to give you the legs that you're going to get from, not that we're biased by any means, but we've seen it for 36 years.
But you're right. I mean, like because the carbon based is going to also store up the battery or charge up the battery of the soil as well as the plant. Like all that energy we're talking about, carbohydrates in the root system, yes, but carbon energy in that whole biological system is what's the real difference maker. And of course, also this, the other fear is juicing up the plant with a synthetic when it does get too cold, because the organic, it'll shut down when it's appropriate to shut down.
When Mother Nature says to.
Right.
I don't know if you guys picked up on this or not, but our friend Bryant Mason, who does a lot of consulting work in Colorado and the West, he had a clip on his Instagram page Thursday, Friday, something like that. I've never heard this before, but it got me to thinking about the dormant feed and the timing. But he had established a high tunnel greenhouse on his property, and he said everything was going great until a certain date, and then vegetatively everything stopped. And he did some research, and have you guys heard this? This is really interesting. Once the daylight hours get less than 10 hours, vegetative growth stops. I've never heard that definitive line before, but it kind of makes sense, especially where I am, where we're going to be, dark for seemingly 16 hours a day.
The rest of your life.
I definitely
have you heard that?
Well, I definitely, the Bermuda grass, like especially in sports fields, it's more about they talk all about sunlight hours and day and sun angle more than root zone temperature.
No doubt. No doubt.
It's like we could push this Bermuda. We've got the glycol system. We'll heat up the root zone. It doesn't do it.
It's not light.
If you're not getting the light,
photosynthesis, baby,
doesn't do it. Yeah,
air, water, light, right?
It makes sense.
But with respect to the timing of a dormant app, I was wondering if that could be kind of your, almost like your growing degree day, your growing light day sort of predictive model to know when it's safe to, not have that flush of growth that everybody's concerned about with a dormant feed.
But honestly, I think 545. 822, you're not going to get that flush that is concerning.
Even 1025, which is a little bit more nitrogen, you still won't get the flush.
Sure, 1025 as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
that was an interesting.
Brian's been on the podcast. I'm desperately trying to get him back. He's traveling a lot. He says he's going to be out of the country for a bunch of the winter, so we'll have him back hopefully early spring, late winter. To talk about it, because he really does have some, he does a lot of work in cannabis and greenhouse stuff and trees and fruit trees, but he's really a very bright agronomist, and he comes up, he does his homework, and if you haven't seen his podcast, you can find that in our files. It's actually a very good one. I might have been over a year ago now, but it was actually pretty interesting. But that was enlightening to get to a meeting like that where they talked so much about these little subtle things that occur. And they interviewed a bunch of superintendents in this meeting, which was really quite informative as well. So it was all good. Jack, what's the big pressure on the East Coast? I mean, we kind of haven't given you the window yet here.
No, I've well, pressure wise, not too sure. I was in the Carolinas last week for the Carolinas conference, and you and I are headed back there next week. The Carolinas is really gearing up, or still kind of in the heart of their big golf season, really.
Yeah.
So a lot of talk about overseed and different, the takes that they got, and things are going good, and really everyone. What one kind of recap conversation on the East Coast, and I don't know if you're seeing it everywhere, but still major golf boom. I mean, still golf rounds are still very strong everywhere.
Yeah.
And so
I contributed to that. I played 3 times last week, and I haven't played 3 times in 3 years.
There you go. Yeah. Golf. And then let's see, like kind of more on the non-golf side of things. It is the time of year where you can really impress people. You can impress the homeowner. If you're a good lawn care operator, you're impressing the homeowner in this late season time of year with cool season grass. So, you're doing a good job at gaining a lot of stand density. You're loading up the carbohydrate reserve and the energy reserve with a good dormant feed, and then you truly impress everyone in the springtime when you come out early. Yeah. and you're green so early in the spring. So cool season, East Coast. I'm seeing a lot of people kind of get a good take in the fall of new seed, and loading it up so that you've got full energy to come out in the spring, do it again next year.
Interesting. I wanted to share this. I saw the movie Common Ground this weekend, which is the sequel to Kiss the Ground, which was a piece that I'm convinced that our founding partner Jerry Bernetti had a play in initiating. It was hosted by Woody Harrelson, the original piece, but he was in both pieces. But they, it's really amazing how they talk about carbon sequestration, which I know, Jack, that's one of your favorites.
Oh yeah, I gotta see that.
Favorite conversation points. But it really was very, very enlightening. It was a small group. I mean, they've been taking this particular film around to small theaters in the country. And we have a very small theater in our town, and we played in this little place, and there was maybe a dozen or so people, and I don't think any of them, short of me, were really in this industry. But it was amazing to see people walk out of there enlightened by the fact that we're talking about they were really talking about how do we change the whole carbon issue that we're dealing with, that may or may not be a concern to a lot of people, but it's a legitimate concern. And their statistics were staggering, the amount of carbon that a healthy soil can hold and clean out of the atmosphere. And they were talking to our friend Gabe Brown, who Jerry knew very well, and I had a chance to meet a few times, who unfortunately is, they announced at the end of the film, is sick with ALS, which was very discouraging. But he talked about his farm, and they showed a couple farmers that had farms, and one side of it was conventional farming, and it was dirt. And the other side was, regenerative farming, carbon-based farming. And they were showing the numbers where when they started on their farms, their farm organic matter was under 1%. And now it's well over 7% of carbon in the soil. So it was really enlightening to see what they're really accomplishing on some of these farms. And they were very adamant about the fact that yes, this is sustainable and it can generate a lot of food for populations that are obviously in need of food. And they were showing farms down in Mexico that were desert that are now semi-arid. I mean, there's
They can do
carbon
it
in the
quickly.
soil, so
You can do
it
it
was
quickly.
fascinating.
Yeah, it can happen fast, and all of that has an evaporative cooling process in the environment. So it's not just the sucking the carbon dioxide out of the air and sequestering it into the soil, but now that carbon dioxide, what do we say about the gain of 1% of organic matter in the soil?
25,000 gallons.
It buffers 20,000 gallons of water. So now that 20,000 gallons of water is evaporating and transpiring out into the atmosphere locally, and that's a cooling. I mean, that's cooling the area.
You're changing your environment.
Yeah, you're literally changing your environment both below the ground and above the ground.
When you see this film, one of the interesting things is the farmers in Mexico were talking about these were deserts, and they were talking about the fact that now that they've changed the soil, and the soil now has more moisture and the plants respire better, they're getting more consistent rainfall, which is fascinating. I mean, the whole system is changing, radically. I mean, you think about it, we as an industry, the golf course industry in particular, gets all this criticism, and, we grow a cover crop. And if we manage carbon effectively, and the big question here is it good carbon or is it bad carbon? Because thatch is not manageable in terms of carbon. And unlike what we heard on a podcast recently, we're not trying to feed the plant carbon. We're trying to build carbon levels in the soil and feed microbes. But when you build humus in the soils on a golf course or on a farm, you're going to change the climates and you're going to change the plant material for the better. And I encourage anybody to see both films now. I mean, I think The Common Ground is going to be available very soon, probably on Netflix or one of the serving profiles. But it's fascinating, and they interviewed a lot of different farmers. The other interesting thing is that they showed where some of these farmers who and these are not old hippies. These are conservative Republicans that they were interviewing. They're actually going to Congress and talking to Congress about the importance of this as a way to mitigate some of the global warming effects. And they highlighted the fact that some of these conservative congressmen were sitting up and listening, and it's like, wow, that's wonderful. I mean, it doesn't have to be political. It's not political. It's just a matter of we've got to save the soil so that we can, and this started back with, Roosevelt, and he knew that, he was there during the Dust Bowl, which was all about, humus in the soil, plowing,
that's right.
losing SOM, losing soil organic matter.
SOM.
So I have to interject something here.
Do it.
You hit the nail on the head. You guys know that I got elected to the Soil Conservation District.
Yes, we do.
I sat
it was
through
all just a preamble for that, bro. So yeah. But
no. What I have to tell you and confirm or affirm what you just said, Joel, is it has to be a grassroots effort, because I listened to 2 university researchers at our state meeting 2 weeks ago, a week ago, I guess it was. Anyway, talking about there's so much money, government money flowing into this research, and they have no idea what they're doing. But you can talk to a farmer, and it doesn't matter, like you said, their political bent. You can talk to a farmer who's done it both ways. I grew up farming conventionally. Now I'm doing a regenerative sort of approach to things. My inputs are down, my soils are healthier, everything's working better.
I'm making more profit.
I asked the question of 2 university researchers because they're talking about this carbon sequestration, the whole concept. And we're talking just in the little state of Idaho, tens of millions of dollars being thrown into research. And I asked them, how are you measuring carbon? No answer. No answer.
They don't understand.
So how are we going to do this? So, but yet you can talk to a farmer who's done this for 4 or 5 years, and he can tell you, I don't lose water off my property.
You can see it.
You can feel it.
You can smell it.
Retain better. There's no runoff in the ditches. Everything's working better. So, from an agricultural perspective, it really needs to be not only consumer driven, but I think individual agriculturalist driven.
You know, a lot of that is being driven by the farm bills, and the farm bills are obviously very slighted toward conventional corporate side, and that's starting to move the other way. I mean,
it is, but
slowly.
It's slowly. I think the growers are doing a better job of innovating than the universities and the government probably could do in this regard, as far as how rapidly they're changing the system.
Yeah.
You know,
and you hit something on the head, and we talked about this earlier today, Kevin. I mean, it's hard to quantify this because it's a whole new world. I mean, you and I were talking about, handheld soil biometers, and are they really a value? We're going to be playing a little bit more with that as the next couple years roll through, just because we want to find ways to quantify this. We want to, we don't want this to be just an opinion, because it's not an opinion. I mean, it's so well supported by so many folks, and you can see it. I mean, the anecdotal evidence is overwhelming. But I think in the next 10 years, certainly and I say this at academies when I teach academies, in the next 10 years, 20 years, those guys that are still around are going to see changes in the way we can quantify soil biology and qualify it. And it's getting better all the time. And you just see it. But, I would really encourage anybody in the turf industry to watch both Kiss the Ground and the Common Ground films. Yes, they may feel a little political, but they're really not. It's about soil. At the end of the day, it's really about, how we treat the soil. And, my favorite bumper sticker, I think, has always been, stop treating your soil like dirt. And that's really been the case on all of that. And having said that, I'm going to shut this thing down because I got to go to another meeting, and I didn't want to have a super long conversation here on Thanksgiving Day while people are eating their turkey and watching football games. But any last thoughts as we roll away here, gents?
Just to come by and see us at all the winter conferences, particularly the Golf Industry Show, and
we'll be there.
STMA, and we were already at GIE, and but yeah,
you're gonna be in Atlantic City for that show. I don't know, Kevin, what's on your docket for the next show wise? Anything out there?
You and I will be up in Canada. We're doing an academy in Seattle, and we'll be all over the place.
And we're going to be doing an academy next week, Jack and I, down in Savannah, Georgia.
And for the first time since I graduated high school and Jack was probably born, we're going to be back in Phoenix for the GIS. I don't know that to be true, Jack, but I think 1986 was the last time it was there.
Well, I was at the ripe age of 1, so.
No, I'm real thankful for all the support my distributor partners and clients have shown this year, and it's been a really good productive year. A lot of construction still going on.
A lot of construction. It's interesting because, like I said earlier, we've been doing this for so long. And it's really now, this year of all years, and I maybe say this every year, but it really has come to fruition. There's very few companies, manufacturers that aren't talking carbon. And I take that to heart because, it's good. In this case, the more the conversation turns around the soil first, which is the title of my upcoming book, which I hope will be out sometime in my life. That's really that's really exciting to see so many young superintendents understanding it, and so many companies starting to really promote the concept. And we're getting past the, it doesn't work until June when it all heats up. I mean, we're past that, I think, because that's obviously nobody would buy it the second time. And, we're past the thought of it being, well, we measured it in the plant and we didn't see carbon. I mean, that was a good one. But it's coming to fruition. Watch the movies. If you haven't watched Fabulous Fungi, that's another Netflix series that everybody in our industry should watch. It's just, first of all, the photography is brilliant, but talking about the mycorrhizal networks as they talk about in Common Ground as well is just really super and fascinating. So I am thankful for you guys and for everybody on our team and for all of our partners. And we will have a proper EarthWorks podcast next week. So if you haven't subscribed, please do, so that you can be informed as to who we're chatting with. Hopefully for 2024, guys, we'll have a whole bunch of new people and some interesting conversations. Not that there's any pressure here, but it's a good podcast team, because I think each one of us do something a little bit differently, and I just think it's worked out very well. So thank you, one and all.
Thanks, guys. Thank you,
Thanks.
everyone.